Hello and welcome to Voices of Agriculture here on the RFD television network. This time we're coming to you once again from the Lone Star State of Texas. And here in Texas, in the month of September, this state had a very unwelcome visitor. Hurricane Ike came calling, leaving devastation for farmers, ranchers, and agriculture in its wake. Ed Wolf has that story.
Hurricane Ike slammed into the northern Texas coastline on September 12th, leaving millions of Texans reeling in the wake of the storm.
I've seen a lot of hurricanes, and that's the worst one I've ever seen.
Ike made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane, ravaging much of southeast Texas. Many coastal communities were utterly destroyed, facing high winds followed by a tidal surge that engulfed half of Chambers and Jefferson counties. Agricultural losses in those two counties alone will total in the tens of millions.
We've got about 90% of the fencing down and cattle that have migrated out of the surge zone. The other issue that these producers are facing is virtually most of their calf crop has been lost. Even if the cattle survived, a lot of them's calves were not able to survive a surge of greater than 15 to 20 feet.
Many of the surviving cattle were miles from their home pastures, roaming free on state and county roads. All the water and grass they could find to eat were severely affected by the massive storm surge.
When that storm surge came in, it brought tons of salt water. And with that salt water, it contaminated the grass, and it also contaminated the freshwater sources those cattle were typically accustomed to drinking out of. And so with the cattle continuing to drink the salt water, we begin to see some dehydration, and eventually the cattle will just die. The challenge now is to try to get those cattle some fresh water as quickly as possible, and also some hay as well.
White's Park in Anahuac serves as the drop-off point for hay, feed, water troughs, and fencing materials. As supplies arrive, volunteers work from sunup to sundown trying to save as many animals as possible. Volunteer fire crews fill water troughs with fresh water, while others deploy countless rolls of hay donated from places all over the state.
Looking at about 27 truckloads of hay that will go out. We probably have an excess of about 150 square bales that'll be going down, and then at this present time about 3.5 tons of feed.
But livestock weren't the only ag losses. Some farmers were days away from harvesting their rice crop, which now lay wasted in the fields. And those who did harvest ahead of the storm say Ike may have a detrimental effect on their second crop.
On our second growth, we're going to more than likely see some major damage on it because some of it was starting to bloom, put on heads and starting to bloom, and therefore if it blew those blooms off, then it won't produce anything. It'll just be blank heads.
John Jenkins' rice dryer, which has been continually operating since 1938, was severely damaged by hurricane-force winds.
We had the major works of our dryer system and elevators that got taken out. The head house was taken off by the winds, and could have been possibility of some tornadoes out here. And to my left, where the round tanks are, we also lost two tops off of them and damaged all of our grain bins.
It will be weeks or even months before the full extent of the damages are known. This makes the relief effort in southeast Texas an ongoing need.
It's not going to end here in the next 2 weeks. It's going to go on for some time now. And even if we find all the cattle and get them located and get them where they can get some feed, that effort's not going to go away.
For Voices of Agriculture, I'm Ed Wolf in Chambers County.
In a little over 2 months, perhaps the greatest spectator sport in the state of Texas will begin. And I'm not speaking of high school football, but rather the Texas legislature. And as far as the rural citizens of this state are concerned, eminent domain stands to be the #1 issue. With us today on the show is Steve Pringle, Legislative Director of the Texas Farm Bureau. And Steve, welcome to the program today.
It's good to be with you.
How about this eminent domain thing? Very frustrating for Texans that supported it in the last session. What are we expecting to see?
What we really hope to accomplish is to obtain passage of the identical legislation that we passed in the last session of the legislature. This year we want to pass it early and be prepared to override the promised governor's veto that we expect Governor Perry will provide as soon as it hits his desk.
If you are successful, what will the eminent domain law look like?
The eminent domain law would compensate landowners or property owners adequately when their property is confiscated for a public use. That's it in a nutshell. Now, there are several things that we want to accomplish. Number one, we want to compensate landowners for all of the factors that are considered in a willing buyer, willing seller transaction. That means the other things that go with the property when it's taken, such as water, minerals, those sorts of things. Secondly, we want to require that the condemning entity provide a good faith offer prior to initiating condemnation proceedings. And thirdly, we want to provide damages for the remaining property if someone is left with a piece of property that is unusable.
A lot of people are rather astonished when they learn that a good faith offer is not even required today. Is that true?
That's exactly right. A Supreme Court ruling in the last several years, that's the state Supreme Court in the last several years, said that any offer at this time is basically considered a good faith offer.
That kind of puts the property owner at a disadvantage, does it not?
The only way that a property owner can possibly obtain a fair market value today is to go spend the money to hire an attorney to defend them in this process.
A lot of some of the state senators that have talked about this issue are calling diminished access a distraction. First of all, what is diminished access, and does this alarm you that they're saying that?
It is extremely alarming, because basically what we're talking about is the failure of the condemning entity to properly compensate the property owner for the taking of their property. And diminished access is the term that I was talking about a while ago, when your property is left, when the property that is left after the condemnation proceeding is less valuable because of the taking, you should be compensated because of that. And in a nutshell, that's what we want to try to fix, and we will not have an adequate compensation provision in eminent domain law in the state of Texas until we get that passed.
Now, you represent rural Texas for the most part, but urban citizens have a stake in this too, don't they?
Obviously. Many people focus on the Trans-Texas corridor. It's easy for those of us in the eastern part of the state of Texas to focus on the Trans-Texas corridor, and properly, that corridor is going to take a lot of property. On the other hand, there are going to be significant transmission lines, gas pipelines, those sorts of things that are going to be taken in the western part of the state of Texas, in Lubbock, Amarillo, Abilene areas. Those areas are going to be impacted by eminent domain just as much as those of us in the Trans-Texas corridor region.
What do you expect to happen? How tough is this going to be?
It's going to be extremely difficult for those of us for those members that attended the annual or biannual legislative seminar in Austin recently. They understand now how difficult it's going to be to pass this. Basically, we have the committee chairman in both the House and the Senate that do not support our position. So it's extremely critical that our members contact their legislator if they want to achieve eminent domain reform that will properly compensate landowners for the taking of their property.
The last session, the last eminent domain bill, overwhelming passage in both houses. What's changed?
Nothing has changed except for the fact that we have even more condemnation proceedings beginning at this time. For that reason, I would argue that this is the most critical legislation that the Texas Farm Bureau has undertaken in over 15 years.
Why is that?
Because this state is growing at a phenomenal rate. We learned just last week that Texas will gain 4 additional congressmen in the next census. What that means is when we have more Texans in Texas, they're going to need services. those services are going to require the taking of property. We understand that. That's the growth of the state. However, it is critical that we properly compensate those Texans that were here before when we take their property for a public use.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. We'll be back with more Voices of Agriculture right after this.
The second annual Ram Tough Tales contest begins now. With the success of last year's inaugural competition, this Texas Farm Bureau contest is back with a new twist. Contestants can enter their tale in 4 distinct categories. Workhorse Dodge truck with a chance to win $2,000, as well as the life-saving experiences, Dodge Classic and Fuel Economy categories, each with a prize of $1,000. Here's how to enter. Name the category and send a brief description of your Ram Tough Tale to Cy Cook, Post Office Box 2689, Waco 76702, or email it to scook@txfb.org. Entries must be received between August 1st and December 31st, 2008. For more information and a complete set of rules, visit www.txfb.org.
The Texas wine industry needs more Texas grapes. Perhaps that's an opportunity for agricultural producers. Ed Wolf has the story.
As you pour yourself a glass of wine, you probably think more about the Napa Valley of California or the Bordeaux region of France than the high plains of Texas. But over the last 32 years, the Lone Star State has been producing a new vintage of wines with a Texas flavor. Llano Winery, located just outside of Lubbock, became the first bonded winery in the state after Prohibition. Mark Hyman, president and COO of Llano Estacado, credits 2 Texas Tech professors with this Texas renaissance.
At first they failed. They started planting local Mustang grapes. And then they realized very quickly within the first 18 months to 2 years that nobody wanted to drink that stuff. So they went to Europe and came back with European vinifera. What is that? Well, that's brands like Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Merlot. And with that said, the rebirth of the industry within the state was done.
Now, with over 160 wineries and 280 commercial growers, the Texas wine industry helps contribute over $1 billion a year to the state's economy. They do so by producing quality, award-winning wines that rival those from other parts of the country and the world.
We've already proven that Texas wine works. We've already proven not only Llano Estacado, but a number of great wineries across the state are winning acclaim, winning awards on a national and international basis. With that said, our biggest challenge is keeping up with our demand. And that demand starts in the vineyard. And God bless our growers who have supported us over the years, and we just need more of them. There just isn't enough grapes.
With 95% of Texas wines consumed within the borders of the state, Texans want Texas wine. And Texas wineries want Texas grapes. The problem is, wineries are growing at a much faster rate than vineyards.
You can build a winery in about a year's time, but it takes 5 or 6 years to get a vineyard into full production. When we started growing grapes in 1986, there were 4 wineries in Texas. And here we are in 2008, and there's 163. And the number of acres in Texas has only increased by about 20%. So if every acre in Texas was in full production, there would still be a very large shortage of wine grapes in Texas.
With only 3,100 acres used for grape production in Texas, opportunity beckons. Several producers have seen the benefits and decided to diversify.
Grapes use less water, they take up a lot less space, so you can get the same income from a much smaller area.
But planting a vineyard is very expensive, costing approximately $11,000 to $15,000 per acre, not counting land and equipment. In an effort to increase grape acreage, the Texas Department of Agriculture has established the Wine Grape Investment Pilot Grant Program. Cliff Bingham of Meadow, Texas, has been growing grapes since 2004. Now, Bingham Family Vineyards produces 120 tons of grapes on 50 acres. The TDA grant, which pays a maximum of $25,000 per applicant, will help defer costs as they expand their operation.
It's very expensive putting grapes in, and so every bit you can get helping. In my situation, I'm putting in so many acres that it'll affect me maybe 5 to 10%, but that's a fantastic help. Some people who are only putting in 5 acres, it will literally help them as much as 30–35%.
Currently, Texas is the 5th largest wine-producing state in the nation, with over 2 million gallons produced annually. And the future looks bright as a growing number of producers taste the sweetness of Texas grapes.
When I was growing cotton, cotton farming was my first love, and I don't know, I just developed a new affinity for something new. The friends we've made along the way, and it's a product that I can actually set a price on instead of being told what I'm going to take for it.
Reporting from the high plains of Texas, I'm Ed Wolf for Voices of Agriculture.
Farmers, ranchers, agricultural workers, and cowboys have always been people of faith. Faith that the newly planted seed will grow, faith that the drought will end sometimes. Well, a group of cowboys near Waco, Texas, are involved in Cowboy Church. In fact, this is a growing movement across the state, and Tom Nicoletti has the story.
Early on a Tuesday morning at a Central Texas ranch in Valley Mills near Waco, members of the Top Hand Cowboy Church meet for a Bible study. The crackling campfire warms the homemade biscuits as the Word of God warms their hearts. This barn fellowship is just one example of the growing intersection between Western culture and Christian faith.
A quick definition of Cowboy Church is really a group of believers that are reaching out to a Western heritage cultural community. Not necessarily a cowboy. It could be a farmer. It could be a farmer ranch hand. It really, what we found is that the percentage of people that are actually cowboys in the Cowboy Church are probably 15% or less.
This movement has exploded over the last several years, especially in Texas, as ministers like Greg Moore felt a burden and a calling to people with strong ties to the land.
I quickly identified with the Western Heritage Cowboy movement, and the idea of starting a Cowboy Church was very intriguing to me, to be able to reach people right where they are, and that's really been the success of the Cowboy Church.
This philosophy of ministry has helped to tear down several perceived barriers many people have about traditional church life.
The difference between the Cowboy Church and traditional church setting was the effort to take down those barriers, the perceived barriers, the stained glass, the padded chairs, the suit and tie, the certain kind of car that's in the parking lot.
One of the things that they've identified with the Cowboy Church is just how casual it is, how you can come as you are, you're not judged, you're welcomed with open arms, and it really has been an opportunity to reach out and touch the rural community with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
This unique type of worship setting and experience has appealed to many people. Some who might never have attended church had these types of ministries not come along.
People who said that they would never darken the door of a church again in their life are now involved and have even grown in their relationship to the Lord to where they're able to take on leadership positions in the Cowboy Church. And I think for me, that's been one of the greatest satisfactions of being in the ministry, is seeing people who had almost given up hope on ever attending church again or having a relationship with the Lord, they're bringing family members and friends and co-workers to church because their lives have been so dramatically changed.
And meetings like this Tuesday morning barn fellowship give these cowboys and cowgirls an opportunity to help each other grow in their faith.
Sitting out here in the backyard when people come on a Tuesday morning where we can eat a few biscuits, sit around the campfire, drink a cup of coffee, we're able to develop a little bit closer relationship with each other here to shepherd one another along in our individual daily walks.
For Voices of Agriculture, I'm Tom Nicoletti in Waco.
Preserving the land, for many farmers and ranchers, it's a sacred trust. We visited Llano Springs Ranch, where that family has just received a major conservation award from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Service. Ed Wolf has the story.
Nestled on the western edge of the Texas Hill Country lies Llano Springs Ranch. Located just south of Junction, this 5,100-acre ranch holds the headwaters of the South Llano River, which for the last 14 years has been entrusted to the Vanderveer family.
We purchased this property in 1994, and when we did, it was your typical neglected ranch. It had been overgrazed and overhunted for many years. There'd been no effort at brush control. The ranch was infested with cedar to the probably 95% degree, and we set out to correct those past sins.
Sins that Tom Vanderveer and his sister Ann Broadnax soon learned would be harder to purge than expected. But this family's love of the land is not new. They have a tradition of nurturing nature that goes back many generations to the woodlands of Indiana, so they're not afraid of hard work.
My full-time job is in Austin. I'm an attorney and practice law there. My wife might disagree with you. She might say this ranch is my full-time job and that's my part-time job, but my usual routine is to work in Austin as an attorney Monday through Thursday, and Thursday night I'll get in my truck and come out here and work here Friday through Sunday and turn around and go back and repeat the process.
This rigorous schedule has allowed them to clear over half of their cedar-infested acres, causing the land to respond in a multitude of beneficial ways.
After you clear the cedar out, the beneficial plants begin to thrive. And this behind me is an example of this. You can see these oak tree trunks are no longer bare. We've got a variety of desirable plants coming in. We've got the agaritas, which fill a niche in the food supply. We've got the live oak of various generations. You can see the very small live oak, which is new growth, and the various stages of the years that have been allowed to proliferate. These plants are food. It gives the deer and wildlife a place to have shelter and food and the things they need, so the wildlife thrives. The grasses also recover over time, which means when the rains come, the ground acts like a sponge and the water goes into the aquifers, which recharges springs and recharges the river and benefits this ranch and everybody downstream too. So it's all interconnected. You start taking care of the land and good things happen.
Good things not only for the land, but for the Vanderveers as well.
This ranch is profitable. That was a goal of ours. We did not want to feed this ranch out of our pockets. It was important to us financially that this piece of property support itself, and it does.
A big help to this ranch's profitability are cost-share grants through the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. The Vanderveers found this land enhancement program works well if they do most of the work themselves. But the ranch's primary source of income is a trophy deer and exotic hunting operation.
When we first got here, this would be a classic example of a stunted type antler on a typical hill country buck in those conditions. Through the work we've done, we're now creating deer like this.
This labor of love for the land was recognized this year by Texas Parks and Wildlife with the Leopold Conservation Award for Texas, part of the department's Lone Star Land Steward Awards program. But the greatest reward for this family is how the land has brought together several generations of Vanderveers for one common goal.
It's a family experience from start to finish. That's what makes it such a joy. It's something that we share between us. It's something we plan for and truly have a bond between us because of this land. I can't think of any greater blessing on a family than to have something that pulls them together even more strongly than just their love for each other.
What we're trying to do here is keep together a large tract of land, create better habitat, better water resources, and hope that a lot of other folks will choose to do the same thing.
Reporting from Kimball County, Texas, I'm Ed Wolf for Voices of Agriculture.
Well, that's our show for this time. Thank you for joining us. For more on these stories and other happenings in the world of Texas agriculture, log on to txfb.org and send me an email message. We'll talk about it on a future show. I'm Gene Hall. For the entire team here at Voices of Agriculture, please join us again next time.